good morning, everyone. As Tom said, I'm one of the lie ministers. I try not to lie too much this morning. If you go over to the church, so I'm sure you've been in the church over the green, which dates back quite a long time. I think the font goes back to Norman times, and I think shortly after the font was installed, I became a lay minister. As Tom said, it has been quite a long time. But it's been a while since we've been here on a regular basis. As Tom said, we're over at the Church of Christ the King at the moment. They're without a full-time vicar at the moment, but they're interviewing on the 5th and 6th of April. So please do pray for the church. They really need somebody who can take the church forward. And it is so important, isn't it, to have good and godly leadership. So do pray for them. Well done for changing your clocks and turning up on time. If you're at home watching in your pajamas and you think, well, we've made it really good time this morning, never mind, you can watch the first half on the recording. Well, as Tom said, this morning we come to the last in our current sermon series entitled Jesus Never Said. And this morning's subject is Jesus never said, you get what you deserve. And there is a common misconception amongst many people, isn't there, that Christians believe that good people go to heaven, bad people go to hell. And that being good is defined primarily in terms of things that you shouldn't do. Sex, drugs, drunkenness, robbery, violence, whatever it is. Which is to say, really, that we do get what we deserve. If we live a good life, we'll be fine. If we don't, then we're in trouble. And I think for most people in practice, that means that the line of goodness is drawn just slightly below the level of goodness they think they're at. So we think we will be okay. But the Bible completely blows that idea out of the water. Because through the Bible, God tells us that the level of goodness we need to achieve has been set by Jesus. And it's a level of total perfection. And so God tells us that every one of us has fallen short of the mark. You may know the verse in Romans where it says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." A few years ago, I was at a checkup in the Bristol Eye Hospital, and I was chatting in the waiting room to an elderly man who was sitting next to me. And turned out he was a retired fireman. So I said to him, what was the biggest fire that you ever attended? And he said, well, the biggest one was amazing. He said it was a chemical plant at Avonmouth that caught fire. And we got called to this fire. And he says, when we pulled up to fight the fire, the heat was so intense that the paint started scorching and blistering on the outside of the fire engine. And they had to back off because of the heat. And I think that's a picture, really, that as human beings, just as we can't survive by walking into an intense fire, in the same way, we just cannot survive if we walk into God's presence. His holiness, his perfection is so intense and powerful that as sinful people, we just can't handle it. In the Old Testament, when Moses went up Mount Sinai to receive the law and the commandments from God, God said to Moses, "Go down and warn the people so that they do not force their way through to see the Lord, and many of them perish." And a few chapters further on it says, "To the Israelites, the glory of the Lord looked like a consuming fire on top of the mountain." And the fact is that no matter how good we manage to be, we can never get anywhere near God's standard. Even the really good people. Even the people whom the church has labeled as saints, even the people who lived hugely sacrificial lives and brought about enormous positive changes to the course of history. And that means that if we do get what we deserve, we are all in big trouble, because we are all facing God's judgment. And in our reading this morning that Ruth read to us, we hear the account of Jesus' encounter with a woman who had broken the Old Testament law. And the religious leaders wanted to know whether Jesus would say that she should get the punishment she deserved. And this incident is one of many clashes that Jesus had with the religious authorities of his time. They had created a religious system that put them in a position of power over the people and which furthered their own interests at the expense of the people. And Jesus confronted and challenged this attitude. So they hated him and were looking for a way to silence him. And of course, eventually they did. They had him put to death. They did manage to silence him, although only for a few days. So they come to Jesus with a question, dragging this woman before them. Now, the questions Jesus faced usually fell into one of two categories, I think. Some people asked questions because they wanted to know the answer. In chapter 3 of John's Gospel, a man called Nicodemus, who was a member of the Jewish ruling council, came secretly to see Jesus and ask him some important questions. And it's clear that he was a serious seeker of truth. He wanted to know what it meant to be born again. Or the rich young man who asked Jesus how he could find eternal life. He seriously wanted to know, although he was rather disappointed with the answer that Jesus gave him, that his wealth was getting in the way. And of course, Jesus' disciples were always asking him questions, and they wanted to know the answers. But there were other occasions, and this incident is one of them, where the people asking the questions were really not interested in learning. They weren't interested in deepening their understanding of God. They wanted to catch Jesus out. And in particular, they wanted to trap him into saying something that would incriminate him according to the religious or the secular law. So they drag this woman in. And they say, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say?" The Anglican Church has produced a small booklet for Lent. I think we've got a shot of it. Yeah, there we are. Thank you. And a few days ago, I was reading this, and the Bible passage for the day was this passage. And there was just a short, very telling comment about this woman. It said, "She was brought alone for a crime that can only be committed jointly." You can't commit adultery on your own. And these religious leaders, who were all men, tell Jesus that in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, in fact, the law in the Old Testament commanded that the man and the woman should be put to death. But these men, these religious leaders, were happy to forget the man and just have the woman put to death. And the question was a real trap for Jesus. Because if he shows mercy, if he says, no, she should not be put to death, then he can be accused of disrespecting the Old Testament law and of contradicting Moses. Moses was quite rightly regarded by the Jews as a great hero of their faith. He was the one who received the law from God and led them out of slavery in Egypt to the border of the Promised Land. And I wonder whether insulting Moses would have been rather like going to Saudi Arabia and insulting the Prophet Muhammad. It would be very difficult for Jesus if he did that, and he could be accused of overturning God's law. But on the other hand, if Jesus said that the law must be fulfilled, then he's in trouble with the Romans, because under their law, the Jews were not allowed to carry out capital punishment. So if Jesus recommends the death penalty, then you can be sure that the religious leaders will be going to the Romans and telling them that Jesus was challenging their authority. Well, in John's account of what happens, the next part of this incident, I think, must be one of the most frustrating passages in the Bible. It says, "But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger." And John doesn't tell us what he wrote. What we do know, though, is that whatever it was that Jesus wrote caused his accusers, or the woman's accusers, to slip away one by one. And I wonder whether, given the fact that Jesus often accused the leaders of hypocrisy, he knew that these men were themselves guilty of sins which would be a real embarrassment if they were publicly known. Now, we don't know what happened, but I wonder whether Jesus bent down and just wrote in the sand the title of a sin: perjury, lying in a court of law. And then maybe he looked up and just glanced around the gathered men and just paused for an instant, looking at one particular man who was the one who knew that he'd done that. Maybe imperceptibly to anyone else, so nobody realized what was going on about the man except the man concerned. And then again, maybe he bent down and wrote adultery. If there was somebody there who was guilty of the very sin that this woman was accused of. And then you can imagine Jesus just looking around again and pausing for a moment, looking at that one man. You can imagine how they would feel, can't you? Ooh. What is Jesus going to do? Is he going to publicly shame me? How did he know? What is he going to do? What should I do? And once this has happened a few times, the men begin to slip away. There's somewhere I need to be, just remembered something. And so all the accusers slink away, leaving Jesus and the woman, and presumably the rest of the crowd. Maybe some of them were quite enjoying the spectacle if they'd sussed out what was going on. They enjoyed seeing Jesus getting one over on the religious leaders. Now, I don't know whether that is what happened, but it's fairly clear, isn't it, that whatever it was, Jesus convinced these men that pursuing this issue was not in their interests. Whatever it was that he wrote in the ground stopped them in their tracks. And of course he said, whichever one of you is without sin, you can throw the first stone. I think it would be true to say that down through the centuries, the church has been rather more preoccupied with sexual sin than with a lot of other issues. To many people, sin is synonymous with sex, isn't it? The expression living in sin used to be used as a description of living together without being married. But Jesus doesn't seem to share that preoccupation. When he was asked what the most important commandment is, he didn't mention anything to do with sex. And there are not many occasions in the gospel, but there are some recorded where Jesus got angry. But it was generally with the hypocritical leaders who, instead of helping people to find God and bringing them into an experience of freedom, were putting up barriers between them and God and enslaving them with a harsh and legalistic religious system. And when Jesus went into the temple, which was supposed to be the center of worship, and found it had been made into a marketplace, he was absolutely livid. And you may know that story, how he grabbed some ropes and really went on the rampage, turning over the tables of the traders and throwing people out of the temple. I mean, this was absolutely outrageous behavior. It was Jesus on the rampage. But Jesus never went on the rampage through the red light district, turning the prostitutes onto the streets. And on the various occasions when he encountered people who were promiscuous, adulterous, or who were prostitutes, he was never angry with them. In fact, one of the recurring criticisms that was made of him was that he was always associating with such people. One of the most divisive issues in the Anglican Church, as I'm sure you know, is to do with sexual relationships, particularly same-sex relationships. And the Living in Love and Faith course, which we're running at the moment, is a response to that. But I think it's good to remember that that is not the most important thing. Jesus says to the woman, "Then neither do I condemn you." As Christians, our attitudes towards sexual behavior is important, but it's not the most important thing. And as Christians, we can easily become very judgmental in the same way that the religious leaders of Jesus' time were. Somebody complains, people today are so judgmental. You can tell just by looking at them. So Jesus didn't judge or condemn the woman because he knew that she didn't need to die for her sin because he was going to. He knew that before long he would go to the cross to take the punishment for her sin and for ours. And that means that all of her sin and all of ours can be forgiven. And it means that we can approach God in all his consuming holiness because God sees each one of us as having the sinless perfection of Jesus himself. But for the woman and for each of us, this is not automatic. In order for that to happen, we need to come to God in faith and repentance. God never ignores sin. And Jesus didn't ignore or gloss over what the woman had done. He says, "Then neither do I condemn you." But he goes on to say, "Go now and leave your life of sin." Jesus challenges her to turn her life around, to receive God's forgiveness and to start heading in a new direction. And so she faced a choice. She could have gone away breathing a sigh of relief and thinking, "Phew, that was a close one," and then go on living in the same way. Or she could respond to Jesus' command to repent, to change direction, and to follow him. Without Jesus, we will get what we deserve. Without forgiveness, we cannot survive in God's presence. But if we come to God in faith and repentance, we can approach him in confidence, knowing that we will not get what we deserve, but we'll be welcomed into his presence. Amen. Perhaps the band would like to come back up and maybe this morning, if you can identify with this woman, if you know that there are things that you are doing wrong in your life and you've never come to Jesus for forgiveness, then this morning would be a great time to do that. And we'll have our prayer ministry team in position when the music starts in a moment, who'll be very happy to pray with you. Or if you are a Christian and you're conscious that your standards have slipped, and there's a need to come to Jesus in repentance again, do come forward and have time with one of our prayer team. Shall we pray? Lord, we do live in a judgmental world where people are very ready to condemn what is done wrong, or even what they think has been done wrong, even if they may be wrong themselves. Lord, we thank you for your offer of forgiveness. And Lord, we thank you that you have forgiven us. Lord, we pray that you would give us a forgiving attitude to those around us, that we would not be judgmental, but that we would be part of your process of welcoming people into a relationship with you, because we ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.